Yeah.
We have a special guest in the building.
Wait, do the horn noise.
Yeah. We're just trying that out. We started
Yeah.
it on our last guest and
We loved it. We said we're doing that every time.
yeah, everyone needs a special like horn or something in the beginning.
Yes. Well, welcome everyone. We have a very special guest. This is Jo, also known as My Favorite Jo on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. That is the European way of spelling favorite people, so there is a U in there.
Yes.
She creates amusing and educational videos where she flips the script and talks largely on neurodiversity with a focus on ADHD and autism from the perspective of what if neurodivergency was the norm.
Woo.
Very exciting. Love her stuff. Welcome, Jo.
Yeah, welcome.
Hello.
Yeah. Now, Jo, you're in Australia, right?
Yes.
So
That's why there's a U in my name in the favorite bit.
yes.
Yes.
And so it's Monday there right now.
Yes, according to my computer.
You're like, I didn't know we were going to be quizzed on this.
It's Monday morning.
Yeah, it is currently Sunday afternoon for us. So it's the morning for you in Australia. And when we were trying to coordinate this interview, that was a lot of fun.
We were so nervous that we were getting the times wrong. We were like, what if we log on and it's like a day late?
Yeah. So we kept checking.
I've actually got two times in my diary. I've written 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock. I'm like, crap, which one is it? I'm like, I'll just turn up in 10 and see if they're there. And then if they're not, I'll come back in an hour.
See what's going on. Well, it worked out.
That's a very me-coded thing to do. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know what time it is, so I'm just going to log on at every time that we discussed and see what happens.
Figure it out. Oh, well, we're so excited to talk to you today. How you doing?
Yeah.
Not too bad. A bit sleepy. I probably been awake for 3 hours, but I'm not quite there yet. But it's fine. We took the doggy for a walk, went to the park, had a chat, had a coffee, and I'm like, it's brain's like getting there. We're getting there.
Oh yeah, it's kind of the opposite in the fact that we've had an entire day at this point, but we're also tired because we are just tired.
Yeah,
so.
We've been recording all day and then we had a break, so we were like, trying to stay awake in the break and get our second wind.
Yeah, and then we might have stopped for a couple beers in between. So
that'll do it. That makes me sleepy. If I'm gonna have a few drinks, you got to keep having a few drinks, otherwise I just fall asleep.
Yeah, exactly.
One is just an elixir for bedtime.
Well, we're really excited to get into some of these questions because I think a lot of our audience, and I mean us included, want to know more about neurodivergence and autism and what you lovingly call neurosparkly, which is such a cool way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not the only, I've heard a few other creators call it neurosparkly as well. And I think we're just going to dive right in.
Yeah. We were wondering, what is neurodivergence? If you can give us a just basic definition of that to start off.
Neurodivergence is essentially anything that is not neurotypical. Neurotypical being what most people call normal. So neurodivergence can be ADHD, it can be autism, it can be OCD, it can be Tourette's, it can be depression, anxiety. It's basically anything that is not normal.
Yeah.
It's sort of the TLDR. Yeah.
That makes sense, because our second question that we had written down was, so can you be autistic and not neurodivergent, or vice versa? So I think it's like everyone who has autism is neurodivergent, but not everyone who's neurodivergent is autistic. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, autism is one type of neurodivergence, but you can definitely be neurodivergent without being autistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Fascinating. And then, so for the rest of this interview, I'll probably call it neurosparkliness, but you use that interchangeably, right, with neurodivergence?
Yeah. Whenever anyone says neurosparkly, neurospicy, that's another one. Yeah, they're switching it out for neurodivergent, because neurodivergent sounds so clinical, and it's a little bit like, I sometimes call the neurotypicals, well, I call them neurotypical, because I'm like, if you're going to call me neurodivergent something really clinical, I'm going to call you something really clinical back. I sometimes call them neurovanilla as well. It's like, we got the spice, we got the sparkles, you're just playing. Like we're only mucking around. We don't hate the neurotypicals, but yeah, I've forgotten what I'm answering.
No, that's perfect. You were just saying you use neurosparkly interchangeably with neurodivergence. But I think that's perfect because it puts a positive spin on it. You're
Yeah.
right. When you say neurodivergence, there's inherently this kind of negative otherness to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
think
sort of like claiming it back, like women have claimed back, like, hey bitch, hey slut. Like we've sort of like, you've used those words against us and now we're going to call it to each other as a term of endearment. It's sort of claiming it back. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's so cool. And honestly, it shows the creativity and it shows the expression of what neurosparkly could be or what neurodivergent people can be, because like we had talked about, there's just this negative connotation if you're anything other than quote unquote normal, when really the most interesting people I've met are usually either on the spectrum or somewhere with the neurodivergent, neurosparkly. They just add spiciness to life and they add zest, you know?
Yes.
So it's very cool. Yeah.
I love it.
So when it comes to neurosparkliness, how does it affect the way we see ourselves and the world around us?
Well, affects. Oh, hello. We got a puppy. This is Lee.
So
Leslie.
hello.
You're going to be distractingly cute. It affects literally everything. Like it is essentially a different brain wiring. We have thought in the past that we're like, you can become neurodivergent, and you're like, not really. You're born with it, unless we're talking acquired brain injury. I'm not sure if that comes under the umbrella of neurodivergent, but it is literally a whole different operating system. It's like comparing Macs and PCs. It's not one's better than the other. They're just different. So depending on what job you want to do is to which operating system you want to use. Like back in the day, if you wanted to code, you were definitely using a Mac. If you wanted to do any sort of graphic design, you were using a Mac. They've all sort of caught up now, but there was definitely one was better for this job over here and one was better at this job over here. But as far as like self-image and whatnot, neurodivergent folk are more likely to have shitty self-image just because with studies and whatnot that they've done, they've said particularly like ADHD kids, and I'm sure the other neurodivergencies are similar, by the time you're 10, you have heard 20,000 extra crappy comments come at you. Wow. So it's, why are you always moving? Why are you so loud? Why are you this? Why are you that? Like, can't you just stop doing that? So yeah, your self-esteem can take a hit with that. I do tend to find, and I mean, this is just personal experience, I do tend to find Americans are even worse again. I don't know what you guys are doing over there. Are you guys American? But like,
yeah.
in Australia, there's not such a stigma. It's just like, oh yeah, that's the quirky kid. I mean, I'm not saying there's no stigma, but Americans seem, I don't know what you guys are doing, but there's a real shame around it. And I'm like, that's not really a thing here. Not like I'm seeing online. And like I see it in Reddit, in different autistic and ADHD threads. They're all like, this is the worst thing ever. I wish I wasn't ADHD. We need a cure. This is the worst. And I'm like, really? I love being ADHD. I love being hyper. Like if you gave me a cure, I don't think I'd take that.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. And that's actually was going to be my follow-up question to that, is whether or not it was different in Australia versus the US. Cause
yeah, I've definitely, there's not such a strong stigma here, and there's not really shame around it here. It's just like, oh yeah, cool, that's the quirky kid, or that's the hyper one. It's not like this real or like, oh, I don't want anyone to know, but like, not that I'd announce it necessarily. You'll work it out within 5 minutes of talking to me, but it's not like, it's not embarrassing, and it's not something that you necessarily, obviously there's scales, there's different, it's obviously a large spectrum, and it does affect people differently. But I just find there's not such, it's not a woe is me thing here as much. Yeah. Where I really find there's a different stigma with you guys.
Great. That is awesome.
And you feel like that is different, like as an adult, do you feel like that affects people's self-worth and like identity differently in Australia because they're not hearing those negative comments as much growing up?
You're still hearing the negative comments, don't get me wrong. You're still definitely getting the sit still, be quiet, oh my God, why are you up a tree again? You're still getting that, but it's not, And you still get teachers completely misunderstanding your intent behind, and you still get people misunderstanding your intent all the time. Like there's so many times I've really stuck my foot in it. But it's I would like to know the difference. I would like to know why you guys are so much worse. I have not worked it out. I haven't talked to enough Americans and really deep dived into that to find out what you guys are doing so differently that it's such an issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I actually find people get mad at me when I say ADHD comes with strengths. Autism comes with strengths. It's not all bad. People get angry at that. And I'm like, why are you upset to find out that you might actually have an advantage in certain areas?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Right.
they get cranky about it.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. I haven't worked it out yet, but
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, because to me it's not like black and white in the sense of, yeah, I have this thing about me that's completely negative and everyone else is completely positive. To me, I always felt that about neurodivergence and neurosparkliness, is I've just thought like it just means they have different strengths than other people. And it's crazy that the US can't really see it that way.
Yeah.
And in general, mental health is still pretty stigmatized, just as an overall blanket statement in the US. We're finally getting to a point where we're having more open discussions with these things and being more accepting of people who are not neurotypical, etc. But what would you say in Australia in general? If is mental health something that you guys, if you're, I don't know, is it openly discussed amongst family members and friends, or not really?
Um, it's definitely better in the last few years. Um, I've never, yeah,
Hmm.
how would it be different? I've definitely had friends growing up with depression and anxiety and whatnot, and I don't know. I've always there's always been sort of a little bit more space for that, I guess.
Mhm.
Like I knew that friends that were depressed, just sometimes they don't want to go out, and that's not really an issue. That might just be a me thing though. I can't. I also know that there's definitely been circles, and these are, I'll tell you the truth, neurotypical circles. You mention anything like depression, and well, they don't want you around their kids anymore. You don't get invites to the Tupperware parties anymore. Um, I do tend to find in spicy circles, it's definitely more acceptable to be like, yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to come out today just because I don't feel like doing humaning, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Whereas if I have found and I won't say it's a neurotypical thing full stop, but it was definitely a very neurotypical circles where you mentioned depression and it's like, oh, you might affect my kids. Like, I'm not inviting you anymore. And they don't openly say it, but you do tend to notice that conversation and this treatment almost, it was like straight up having that conversation, I stopped being invited to things. Like it was, yeah.
Wow, that's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, it's a bit shitty. So I think it very much can depend on what people you hang around. Like I definitely nowadays, the people I hang around most are fabulous people. Like I don't really make time for the shitty people anymore. Like when you're growing up, you're like, I want to be friends with everyone and I want to get on with everyone and I want you to like me. And then you sort of hit 30 plus and you're just like, I don't have energy for this shit. I don't care if you like me. I don't even know why I'm trying so hard.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely around better people now. So I think it just generally depends on who you're around as to
Yeah.
how acceptable it is.
Pick your circle wisely.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah.
What would you say are some positives and some maybe challenges of being neurodivergent or having autism?
We can go on for a while with this.
I know.
Big topic.
Yeah.
When you look in Hollywood, when you look at all your favorite celebrities, all your favorite entertainers, all the greatest inventors and the people that we've called geniuses and prodigies and whatnot in all of human history, they're almost always, when you read personal accounts, you're just like, oh, they're definitely ADHD, or they're definitely autistic, like, or they're definitely something else. Like there's almost I'm only putting the almost in there to be polite. Every person that you've ever seen that has changed the world, that people love, that people are drawn to, they're almost always spicy in some way. Like, it is the prodigies and the geniuses are the ones who are obsessed, or as I like to call it, passionate about their special interest. The Ryan Reynolds, the Betty Whites, the Jack Blacks, like, I would marry any of them. It's that energy that you're drawn to, and that energy is called ADHD.
Yeah.
That obsession and that passion that makes you the best at anything, that's called autistic hyperfocus. We don't call it hyperfocus so much with autism. You call it special interest, which is essentially a hyperfocus. Like, it's something that you are just passionately obsessed with. All the greatest athletes, the Simone Biles, the Michael Phelps, the Michael Jordans, they're all ADHD, and they're just like, this thing hits the dopamine button in my head, and so I'm just going to keep doing it. And then also super competitive. I'm going to beat everyone. And I've forgotten what I'm answering again. But
you're doing good.
Advantages. We're talking about advantages. So yeah, like that passion, that drive. If you challenge an ADHDer to a competition, any sort of competition, we will beat you, because we're going to beat you. We will find a way to beat you. It's not can we, if it's how many crazy things I've done just because somebody has said, oh, I bet you can't do blah blah. I'm like, really?
Challenge accepted. Yeah,
that's right. Like, there's so many strengths. The charisma, the unique way of like this whole out of the box thinking. Most of us aren't even aware there's a box. Like, so we will come up with unique answers because the neurotypicals are thinking here, and we're like, what box?
Not
yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Like, we're like, oh, look, you see things from such a different angle. I'm like, I just see things. What are you looking at? And like that real creative, you want to, like, a lot of people, we can be quite isolated a lot of the time because, neurotypicals are the majority, and we'd be like, oh, I've got no friends or whatever. You want spicy friends, go to the creative circles. So arts and crafts, musos, gigs, things like that, generally all spicy folks. Adult sports tend to be all us. They're like, we need to wriggle, we need to move. I'm not sitting on the couch watching Netflix all day. What's a third one? Creatives, tech is full of us. So I mean, if you want some neurospicy friends, tech circles, creative circles, and adult sports, it's where we're all hanging.
How cool. Yeah, and we actually had someone on our pod a couple weeks ago. I'm sure you know, or I'm not sure if you know him, but it's ADHD therapist Jay on Instagram.
Yeah.
You do? Yeah.
Yeah.
He was on our podcast, and he was talking about the exact same thing you did, which is, they tend to in this community, we tend to hyperfixate on a passion of ours, and as a result can become extremely good at it and very successful. So I think hyperfixation in general is a really good trait to have, especially if it's channeled towards something you're really passionate about and can yield results from, So that's awesome. That's cool. What would you say are some of the like the negatives with neurodivergence, neurospiking?
We are often prone to anxiety or depression. I tend to find your hyper ADHDers are more prone to anxiety because our brain goes jump, 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 jump. Oh shit! How do we end up over here? And your sleepy kind of ADHDers, I call them the sleepy kind. What's the actual proper word? I'm having a total mental blank. The coffee hasn't kicked in. I call them the sleepy kind, the non-hyper kind. They are more prone to depression. I don't know why. That's just the way we are. That's the way we are wired. We've got, those dopamine receptors aren't always super receptive, and that's the way we can go. Obsessions, those passions can turn into obsessions. Like, we're often told that we're obsessed to start with, and I'm like, no, obsession is negative. We are passionate. When we love something, we love it. But it can turn into obsession. It can be it can turn to OCD. I mean, OCD is a neurodivergence as well, and it can become an issue. Mm-hmm. Anxiety can become controlling, as can depression. Like, we're prone to anxiety, we're prone to depression, but that can become a full-blown issue. Like, you can become so anxious you can't make a decision. You can I've known people that they're just like, they cannot make a decision until they talk to their mum, and you're just like, you're a grown-ass adult, just make a decision. Like, there's really no wrong answer here. And then depression can obviously also get a hold. And then like we actually have, our suicide rates are much higher than neurotypicals because of those sorts of things, and because we lack support, and like can lack support, and because we can also feel like we're really alone. Because there's not always that community, and people don't know how to find other sparkly folk that actually. And then you've also been taught in polite society we don't talk about those sorts of things, and so it can feel lonely, and it can lead to spiraling. Burnout's also a really big one in our society, because we were not designed for 9 to 5 Monday to Friday jobs. We are actually ADHDers and autistic folk are like, well, depending on which neurodivergency we're talking about, but ADHDs are 300% more likely to start their own business, because 9 to 5 Monday to Friday doesn't work for us. We have really high energy moments, and then we have we're done moments. Like, and 9 to 5 doesn't cater for that. You have to be moderate from 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and you're like, no, I am really hyper on Tuesday and I want to do 5 days worth of work, and then Wednesday I'm done. I just want to lay on the couch. Which works really well for businesses. If you're running your own business, awesome. Do a whole week's worth of work in that one day, and then just lay on the couch the next day. No one cares. It's your business.
Right.
And autistic, bipolar is another one. They are 10 times more likely to start their own business. And again, bipolar comes with like gifts and talents of when they are up, they are super creative. They will come up with so many out of the box ideas that people have never thought of before. And then when they're low, you need to leave them alone. But again, that doesn't really lend itself to 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, but entrepreneurship, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, we definitely have challenges we have to work with, but those challenges are exacerbated by the way society's been designed. It's when we get a little more freedom, a little less structure, that sort of thing, they're not quite as bad. And then support and understanding, often we're far more able to cope with what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just doing another interview with someone who was saying, you know, if you don't fit into the dominant culture, whatever that is, and however they've decided to control the world and what days look like, then you're not going to feel like you belong, and you're not going to fit into that typical plan, that typical life plan that, you know, people map out for you. And that gets lonely, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine, like, the early birds are the ones that set up so many schedules, and you're just like, oh my God, why do I need to be in the office at 9? Who was, the rest of us were asleep while they were making those rules up.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. Why can't they do jobs which start at 12 and go till 8? I don't know. Like, some of us don't want to be working at 9 in the morning. We're not there. Like, it's 10:30 now, and I'm still like, the brain's still, it's getting there, but
I know. It's like in the corporate world, it's almost like a one size fits all approach. And I feel like we're past that now as a society, where we need to be accepting of how we all function in this world, which is completely different. There needs to be more flexibility with that. I know that like something that was kind of trending on social media for a bit was like, you know, 4-hour work week, right? Like trying to just shorten the week at least to
4-day work week.
Oh, 4 day. The 4-hour work week, that's a book.
Oh yeah, it is. You're right. No, 4-day. 4-day work week.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just thought that was cool. At least someone's proposing something different out there. It might not be the best structure for everyone, but it's different. You know,
just to have.
Well, they've actually done studies on that and found that production goes through the roof. And so when they're saying no, it's just because they're like, no, we might lose our control. Just like,
yeah.
Well, they're like, production might go down because you're only working 4 out of 5 days. I'm like, they did studies. It goes up.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've answered that.
Yeah. And literally all the results of that study was
positive.
Workers were more productive. And it's like, okay, let's listen.
Yeah. So do you feel like our podcast is all things mental health, but then we kind of try to see how it intersects with codependency? That was how we started this podcast, something that Brooke and I, you know, are always working through. But do you feel like people who are neurodivergent are more likely to be in codependent relationships? Just some of the things that you were saying, I think, like abandonment or self-worth issues, like do those come up in trying to maintain healthy relationships?
we're definitely more likely to be in codependent relationships.
Mhm.
And that can really go one of two ways. You can find your penny from Big Bang, like, and I've got a few of those in my life, which is actually why I can talk neurotypical so well, because they've sort of held my hand and very politely and kindly shown me different ways of communicating with people. So you can definitely find your penny, and who loves you and sees you for who you are, realizes there's no malicious intent in the way that you just blurted out that question bluntly. Yeah, so that's awesome when you find those people. But a lot of neurodivergent people are more likely to end up in narcissistic and abusive relationships, because you have that one person who, much like Penny, can sort of swoop in and save you in a social situation that you just totally blundered. But then in private, and so, you're like, oh my God, thank you so much, you saved me. But then in private, they can really tear into your self-esteem. So we start to believe that, and they're telling us, oh, I can't believe you stuffed it up again. And you sort of start to believe that I need this person. I need them to come in and swoop in and save me. I need them to show me what I should be doing, especially because we are often told growing up that our emotional response to something's wrong. So, like, when someone goes, I don't know, grandma died, and you smile, not because grandma died, but because you went, grandma died, and then it linked to this and linked to that and it linked to this and oh, mum's still here. I'm really happy mum's here. And that's the part which you smiled at. And so because you're told a lot that your emotional responses to things are wrong as a kid, or you find something funny that shouldn't be funny, or you actually start to, you stop trusting your own emotional responses to things. And so I find, even as an adult, even though I'm not quite as severe as some people I've seen, in really high emotionally charged situations, I will actually look around and go, how am I meant to be responding? And I'll look at other people and go, okay, that person's smiling, that person's smiling, that person, I'm allowed to smile. Okay. Yeah. So because we learn to not trust our own emotions.
Yeah.
If that narcissistic person comes in, we're like, I need that person. That person tells me how to be. That person teaches me how I'm supposed to be in society, because I don't want to get yelled at again. Because there's a lot of nasty people growing up that will yell at you for your blunt question, for the way that you said that, for the tone that you said it in, for the way that you didn't answer, the way that blah, 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 blah. Like, so yeah, we can be prone to shitty relationships. But we can also have really great ones. So it depends who finds you.
Yeah.
Like, I've definitely had both, not full-blown relationships, but like even just friendships. And I actually didn't realize how toxic this friendship was until I had a penny over here, and I'm like, hang on, this person is basically doing the same thing. Like, they're explaining, or they're not even explaining, they're just modeling how this could have been done better. And I feel good when I'm with this person, and yet this person's sort of berating the way that I did that, and I feel shitty when I'm with them. And so because I had that comparison at the same time, I'm like, hang on, this is toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
That's so crucial, like just paying attention to your body and how it responds around certain people too. Like, do I feel good around this person, or do I usually feel like shit about myself around this person? And yeah, those are complicated relationships when you partner up with the wrong person, maybe like a narcissist or people like that, because it does a number on your self-esteem. And we've talked about that. Yeah.
Another problem is those narcissistic abusive relationships spike our dopamine. And so drama will spike your dopamine just as much as, fun, exciting things. So with that drama, you become addicted to these people. That's the other flip side to it. We are more likely to be addicted to narcissists because there's drama, and then they fix it, and then they create drama, but then they fix it and they create drama. And so when we do meet the nice guy or the nice girl or the nice partner, whatever, we interpret that as boring because there's no dopamine spikes. Yeah. So we go back to the narcissistic relationships. So we need to be really aware that we can be prone to that. Yeah. I've got a friend going through that at the moment. I'm trying to explain to her, I'm like, this guy is so toxic. Like, stop. You need to just cut him off. And she's like, but he did this. I'm like, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. I don't think that means what you think it means. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty.
I think in codependency too, like we don't want to be triggered, so to speak, but yet when there isn't any triggers, we also get worried and anxious of like, well, we kind of also want something to be wrong so
Yeah.
we can
So I
like,
can fix it.
yeah. So it's kind of really,
We do give, that's another, you just remind me of another one. We do give people the benefit of the doubt far more than we should. We do it way more than neurotypicals, because we've been misunderstood so many times in our life. We're like, oh, but hang on, they were having a bad day. Oh, hang on, they were drunk. Oh, oh, maybe I was being really annoying that day. That's why they yelled at me. Like, so we will extend the benefit of the doubt far more than we should, is another aspect of those relationships.
Makes sense.
and that is codependent. I think 1,000%, right?
Right.
I mean, we definitely I deal with that all the
Yeah.
time where it's, yeah.
I know. And then you get into the situation where if it happens over and over and over, it's almost a vicious cycle. You're like, well, then I get into my own head, because if I do that and I make excuses or whatever, and then it happens again, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, but I can't get mad at this or not give him an excuse this time because I gave it to him last time. So now I can't change my mind and say I've had enough or this is not acceptable to me, because I said it was acceptable the last time. It's like
Yeah.
finding a moment to actually create that boundary. I feel like I can't do it because I haven't been doing it for a year, however long I've been with this person.
Yep.
Yeah, that whole boil the frog thing, that definitely happened.
We immediately turn it on ourselves and blame ourselves when we're giving benefit of the doubt after benefit of the doubt after benefit of the doubt, and it's like, all right, got to put down that line.
I need to cut this off.
Yeah.
There's that whole sunken cost thing where you just like you've damaged me this much. Maybe they'll come good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, like I'm too in the red on this. I need to at least get to black before we
Yeah.
We were talking about masking. I was wondering if you could just describe what that's like in a neurodivergent's life.
Mhm.
I call masking cosplaying as a neurotypical. So it is basically where you will suppress natural behaviors for yourself, and you want to appear as normal as possible. So it can mean I really want rainbow hair, but I'm going to keep it long and I'm going to keep it blonde or brown or black or red. It can be the way you dress. Like, I've got to wear pastels or beige, or I've got to wear corporate clothes. Not my bright colors. Like a lot of neurotypicals, not a lot of neurodivergent people, not a lot, but it's very common in neurodivergent people to have one color or a color combination that you are super passionate about. Like I've got two friends who everything is purple, and I mean everything is purple. Mine is rainbow. I've got another friend who is rainbow. Everything's rainbow. And some of them won't dress that way because they're like, oh, it's a bit over the top. I need to be more beige. It can be not moving as much, like you've been told that tapping your foot is annoying so many times in your life. You're like, okay, I've got to stop tapping my foot, but it takes so much energy to not tap your foot. Like you have to consciously think about it, and you'll do it, and you're like, no, stop. It can be not making sound effects. Like I often, when I'm bored, I'll just be like, just start making popping noises. Or like you just, as you talk, you might change accents all of a sudden just because it's fun, and it just presses that little dopamine button. It's all these little funny things that you do, all these little quirks that you don't do when you're masking. And that can actually be super unhealthy because it is exhausting. Yes. I remember this group of neurotypical mums that I used to hang around. They were super neurotypical. They were all blonde. They all wore beige. They had Tupperware parties. Like,
yeah.
And like I used to try and be as normal as possible. And I would be wrecked at the end of those days, like absolutely exhausted. And I'm like, after a while, I'm like, why am I putting so much effort into trying to get you guys to like me when I don't even think, now that I think of it, I don't think I like you. I'm going to all this effort. I'm exhausted and you still don't really like me anyway. So why am I putting in this effort? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not.
I don't like me when I'm with you because I'm having to do
Yeah.
all these gymnastics.
Right.
Mhm. And the conversations are boring because I've got to make sure that they're polite conversations. I've got to watch what I remember once launching into this conversation about, I hope none of them see this, but anyway, if they do, whatever, I don't talk to them anymore. I remember once launching into this conversation amongst this polite little circle of how Australia was getting a body farm. Because I always loved true crime and whatnot. And a body farm is where we study the decay of bodies over time. And up until now, Australia had to rely on American data. But your environment's not exactly the same as ours, so it's not fully accurate. But we got our own body farm, so we can start to study if a body is left out in the sun, in the Australian sun for 6 hours, how much decay. So it really helps with forensic studies and solving crime and all the rest of the stuff. And I was so excited, and I'm telling them all about this. And then I don't know, I must have gone for about 5 minutes, and then I stopped and dead silence. About painful 10 seconds before one of them went, "That's a nice handbag. Is that new?"
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, okay, that was the wrong audience for that conversation.
Yeah.
Well, just for the record, if you told one of us that, that was fascinating. I wanted to learn more right now. Yeah.
Right. I know. And see, and that's also, I just don't really hold back anymore with those sorts of things. I'm like, if I launch into this conversation and you actually reciprocate, I found my people.
Right.
If you don't, I'm in the wrong crowd, and I'm probably not going to put a lot of effort into this relationship anyway. So it doesn't matter if I offend you.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, being yourself is like a litmus test for if you want to hang out with that person. You're not talking to people to get them to like you. You're just noticing the response and then deciding if those people should be in your life or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Megan and I talk about this often too, where we're like meeting new people or getting in new groups of people, and we say something that we think is like either intriguing or at least a conversation starter, and then the rest of the group just ignores it or like sidesteps it, and it always irritates the hell out of us because and then we'll like run it by each other and be like, "I said this," and I'd be like, "That's dope. I would have."
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just it's all about finding your people in this
Yeah.
world, you know. Yeah,
Nice.
I agree.
I remember when I met one friend at the park, and then after about, when I say I met, like first time I'd ever met her, and I just started chatting to her because we both happened to be standing there at the same time. And after about 5 minutes, she's like, "You're ADHD, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, how can you tell?" And she's like, "Because you told this joke." And I'm like, "You are too." And she's like, "How can you tell?" I'm like, "Because you laughed at that joke."
Take one to know one.
Yeah,
That's
great
right.
minds. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Well, so if you're not, so masking ends up being detrimental to people, right? We don't
Yeah.
want to do it. We're not encouraging people to do it. But then if you're not masking and you want to be in a relationship or a friendship or whatever with a neurodivergent person who wants to be in a relationship with a neurotypical, what are some challenges that presents when you're not masking, hopefully, because that's the goal.
Yeah.
I find I have neurotypical friends. I'm not anti-neurotypical, even if my TikToks, it's me taking the piss constantly. But I think the most important thing is just, are they kind? Like, I've got neurotypical friends, and they see me for me. They realize that when I say something offensive, that there's no malicious intent behind it. It's just me asking a question, and I didn't realize that you would find it offensive. Kind of like when a little kid goes, "Why's that man got no teeth?" Like, it's not them being rude, they're just genuinely asking a question. So it's more important that there's kindness, I think, because that can go both ways. Like, neurodivergent people can be real dicks to neurotypical people, and it's because we've been treated so shitty that we just don't have time to bother. And yeah, if someone is shitty, you will kick off jerk mode in me, where I almost go out of my way to piss you off, because I'm like, it becomes a game then. Like,
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
a shitty person, if you're a shitty person, you've just clicked on the competitive game for me on how much can I piss you off while appearing polite. Like, I've done it so many times at parties. But
Party trick.
yeah, but I think one challenge that neurotypicals can have being friends with neurodivergent people is there is a little bit of an entitlement there, because they have watched parents, teachers, adults constantly telling people like us that we're wrong, that you don't sit on the chair like that, that you're not supposed to speak like that, that it's rude when you speak this or say that or ask questions, or it's rude. So they've got all these arbitrary rules in their head where it's rude if you talk with your mouth full of food. But you just said something really interesting right after I took a bite of food. And so I'm like, oh my God, tell me more. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be rude. I just happened to have food in my mouth when you said something interesting. Like, so it's more, there can be a little bit of that entitlement that everything that I do as a neurotypical is correct, and everything that you do as a neurodivergent is, if it's different from the way I do it, it's wrong. But then that's where the kindness comes in, and that's where sort of questioning what I've been taught growing up, is that actually accurate, or is that just some arbitrary rule? Like, another one's like matching socks, for example. Like, I don't know who decided that had to be a thing. As long as my socks feel the same, I don't care if they're the same color. But some people get real. I've had people go like, "Why aren't your socks matching?" Like, or like, "Why aren't you wearing shoes?" I'm like, "I'm at the park. I'm standing on grass. It's healthy for you to not wear shoes." But some people get really upset about you not wearing shoes, and you're like, who cares if I'm wearing shoes? Why do you care if I'm wearing shoes?
Right. I think you're a psychopath if you do match your socks. Like, I think that's straight. Who in the morning is spending the time finding the matching sock to the other sock? Me.
Yeah, they spend the whole Saturday matching socks because they're doing the laundry, and then they'll bitch about it.
Right.
They spend
Like,
matching socks.
You also
I'm like,
don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Guess what? You cannot do that.
exactly. You're an adult now. You don't have to match socks. They don't take you to jail or anything.
I promise.
You can eat. You can eat dessert for breakfast. You can bend the rules. You're an adult.
Yeah.
Do whatever the hell you want. Yeah.
Not bend. Those rules aren't real rules. They're just So just break them all together. Remove them. They're not real rules.
Exactly. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, because I've noticed on social media that we are talking a lot more about neurodivergence, neurosparkly, autism. And I've also noticed that with some celebrities, they are, or not even just celebrities, but more adults are really finding out later in their lives that they're autistic or neurodivergent. I think Amy Schumer's husband got a late diagnosis with autism. I just found that interesting, and I was wondering what your take is on that. Why do you think there's so many late diagnoses happening with these things?
A lot of information that we have about different neurodivergencies is only 20 years old. Any of the good information, I should say. Especially with women, or I should say AFAB in general. Trans people are a whole other group of people that have never been studied, because we just only 20, 30 years ago, I've forgotten the exact year, we didn't even think girls could have autism. And so when you're all of a sudden including half the population, there's going to be a lot more diagnoses. And then also when we've changed our definitions, like a lot of our definitions of neurodivergence, when you look at the DSM, and when you have those quizzes that have been created from the DSM, a lot of them are only identifying more extreme cases of it. Like when people hear the word autistic, they think of the Rain Man, and they think of Sheldon. Sheldon's not even that extreme, but he's obvious. Like they tend to think of these more extreme cases where it's very, very obvious. Where we've actually discovered, particularly in women, it's a lot more subtle a lot of the time. So, I mean, autism in girls often looks like the horse girl, or it's the quirky girl it's the tomboy. It's the girl that doesn't quite fit the model of what a girl should be. And same with boys, they don't quite fit the model of what a boy should be. And which is why a lot of the trans community is actually autistic, because we're told our whole lives, I shouldn't say we, I'm not trans, but trans people are told their whole lives, you don't belong in this group that you've been told you should belong in this group. So like I was the tomboy, and you're supposed to fit in with the girls, but I got told by the girls, oh, you're not like us. Like I always found that phrase, I'm not like other girls, really annoying, because I'm like, especially how people would make fun of that. I'm like, but I'm not like other girls.
No,
I don't
seriously.
and I don't say that as like a badge of honor. The other girls told me I'm not like it's just so when you're told that you don't belong in this group that you're supposed to belong in, what conclusion are you going to come to? And especially if you're like, oh, I've actually got more in common with that group over there, which I'm not supposed to belong to. And so this is where you get a lot of transgender people just going, I don't feel like I belong here. I belong over there. Or non-binary folk. You're like, I don't belong here and I don't belong there. I kind of belong to both, but neither. And so I'm just going to sit in the middle here. And I've forgotten what I'm answering again. What am I answering?
I love it. Yeah, we're just talking about autism late diagnosis and
that's what it was. Right. Okay. I went totally off on a tangent there. So yes, we've basically redefined a lot of stuff. So we've always had this spectrum, but we really only knew what this end of it looked like. And when I say this end, people are going to misunderstand what I mean there. It's more of a circle, and how much you fill up the circle, you're not one end or the other, but I mean like high support needs, low support needs. There's not really a good word for, none of the words really fit for me, but like as to none of them sit right. But everyone sort of identifies the Bart Simpsons as ADHD. No one identifies the girl that's just staring out the window because she's not causing a problem. And we tend to only diagnose people that cause us problems, and which is where all the boys got diagnosed because they're more likely to present as the hyperactive kind, where girls are more likely to be the daydreamers. Although that said, I was a hyperactive kind, but I was a girl, so girls don't really do ADHD. We won't bother with that. So it's very common for women to be diagnosed when their sons are, which is how I was. Their son gets diagnosed, and as you're looking at all the criteria, you're like, oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. Oh, I thought that was normal. Oh, I thought that was normal. And also because it runs in families, you get told growing up, you're not ADHD, you're just like your dad. And and I'm like, yeah, about that. Yeah. And then there's also just like the adults in your life need to identify it to even bother taking you to the doctor in the first place. And if they don't know what it looks like, especially if you are not a more extreme case, like if you're not a Sheldon or a Rain Man, they're not going to take you because they don't know what they're looking at. Especially if it does run in the family and you're just like your dad, who was never diagnosed.
Right.
Exactly.
I've often wondered myself if I'm on the spectrum for autism. I was, a tomboy growing up as well, never really felt like I belonged, always felt like I was saying the wrong things at the wrong moments, not understanding social cues, some sensory issues. But, and I think it's important to just remind ourselves that things can be on a spectrum. I don't have, it's like, it doesn't always have to be one extreme or the other, but I really resonated with what you said about that belonging, right? And then like the non-binary folk, that struggle as well, not feeling like they belong anywhere and feeling like the odd man out. So yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. And I don't know, I think we need to be kinder to our neurodivergent friends and our neurotypicals too, but everyone needs to understand.
Everyone's kind to them. Everyone's kind enough to
they get enough kindness.
You say sensory issues. I mean, most people hear sensory issues, they go, oh, it's the kid that has a meltdown when they've got a tag on their shirt. You're like, that wasn't me. But I do have and then I'm like, and then a lot of people talk about, oh, they've got a real specific sock thing. And I made a video about this one time because somebody said, because they're like, oh, it's often a question, do you have an issue with socks? Because a lot of autistic people either love socks or hate socks. Like they've got a very strong opinion on socks. And I'm like, I don't have a sock thing. And then somebody else said in the comments, they're like, tell me about socks. And I'm like, oh, well, in that case, yeah, look, like I don't care if they match, but they do need to feel the same. They don't necessarily need to look the same. And then if I prefer shorter cut ones, but then if they are longer, I'll just fold them in and down, like not out and down though, because then there's that extra layer of pressure because I don't like where they squeeze. And then as I'm going on and on, I'm like, oh, I have a sock thing. But no one ever worded the question that way. They just said, do you like the quizzes generally go, do you have an issue with socks? And I'm like, no, I don't have an issue with socks. But if you say, tell me about socks, a neurodivergent person said, tell me about socks, because they understood what it was like to have a sock thing. Tell me about sock. I'm like, that's a very different question.
Totally. 100%. I think in a lot of the ways that these tests are worded, they're written by neurotypicals oftentimes, and so it's not
Yeah.
actually super
point.
friendly for the people who are answering the questions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, I noticed on one of your posts you talked about rejection sensitivity disorder. Can you tell us what that means or how that might feel for someone who's neurosparkly?
So rejection sensitivity disorder is basically you're super sensitive to rejection, and that it doesn't even need to actually be rejection. It can be that you think you're about to be rejected, so you almost perceive it before it happens. um, and the theory on where that comes from basically is, like I said earlier, 20,000 more shitty comments in that first 10 years of your life, because you get rejected, told off, etc. so often in your life, you actually become super sensitive to it. And this is the hubby just bringing my charger.
Hi, hubby.
Hello. Goodbye. Place has never been on here before. But yeah, we can become super sensitive to criticism because we've been criticized so much. And so like it can just be sort of, we may not always pick up on the tone of voice, but if that tone of voice is even remotely disapproving, it can sort of destroy us. And we can be, especially if we really respect the person, if it's your favorite teacher or whatever, and they sort of give a disapproving look, if they look at you in the wrong way, you're just like, for a whole week, you're just like, oh my God, what do I do? Oh, they hate me. And you can just really go in on yourself. But the flip side to that, ADHDers particularly are never one thing or the other. Like we're never moderate. We're always both extremes of the spectrum. So in the same way that criticism can destroy us, praise can leave us flying on cloud nine for a month. Like if that favorite teacher says something like, Joe's really awesome, I love her passion for this, blah, 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 I'm like, yeah, here I am. Like, and you're on cloud nine for the next month. So, I mean, and this is what really annoys me with the deficit model and the way that we diagnose people is we only ever tell them the really shitty stuff, and we don't tell them the really good stuff. We tell them, oh, you're probably going to be super sensitive, which is, by the way, when you are super sensitive, that means you get criticized more. I'm super sensitive to criticism, which actually means I get criticized more because now I'm being told I'm too sensitive on top of it. And you're just like, but if you get told that you're super sensitive to praise, and if more to the point, if they tell your parents and your teachers and whatnot, this person is ADHD, therefore they are super sensitive to praise. I mean, parents can work with that. They can be like, look, this kid really loves being told they're awesome. They really love, positive affirmations and whatnot. Let's work with that. But they don't tell you that bit. They just say they're super sensitive. It sort of, it drives me nuts how they tell you all the bad bits, but they don't tell you the good bits that go with it, because it's just unfair. It sets people up for failure, and it sets them up for that really low self-esteem.
Absolutely. What else is going to happen? I mean, what else do you think is going to happen?
That's the obvious result right there. Yeah.
So, I mean, to that point, what can parents and teachers do to support their neurosparkly kids?
There's a few things which I did actually write down. I'm totally mental blanking on right now, but I could at least start with one. My mum always said every time that any of us kids have called her talking about our kids, she's like, all you got to do is love them. Like, my mum was really great at this. I see the opposite all the time in my comments where they're like, my mum, always yelling at me, judging me, this, that, and whatever. And it's just this bombardment of crap right from the start. And my mum was never like that. She was just like, even when I told her, by the way, I officially got a diagnosis, she's like, what? No, that's not you. You're just, she's like, you're just, it wasn't your weird or your quirky. It was just, Joe's just Joe. And I'm like, yes. And it turns out Joe's autistic. But like, she didn't care that we'd go to the beach when we were little and all the kids went in the water and I'd sit there making a sandcastle. And then all the kids came out of the water and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to go in now. And she's just like, that was just you. It wasn't like Joe's antisocial. And I wasn't necessarily, but she's like, you just did your own thing. Whatever you wanted to do, that's what you did. And it didn't bother her. She didn't try and force me to go play with the other kids. She didn't try and force me to do any of those bits of it. She's like, and you'd always be up a tree somewhere. And again, it's just what Jo does, is she climbs everything. And you just did this or you just did that. And she wasn't bothered by it. She's like, you just got to love them for whatever they are, whoever they are. Just love them. Don't judge them. That's not, just love who they are. Don't give them a complex for, for, don't try and force things. I've heard some horror stories on parents trying to help their kids do homework and like tying them to chairs and stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, don't force it. Make it fun. Making it fun is how you get us to do stuff. Our brains are very fun focused. And so if you play some music, if you write the answers on the wall and you have to run to the answer or something like that, that's a fun way to do homework. It's, you got to get them moving, and getting them moving is a big one. Particularly for ADHD, autism as well, less so, but ADHD, get kids moving, get them in sports, because exercise is a very good natural way to get that dopamine flowing. So get them moving and you will see a lot of traits get a lot milder. Yeah. There was definitely more points there, but I'm totally mental blanking right now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm a speech therapist. I work at a hospital right now, and I have some outpatient pediatric clients that come in. And so sometimes I have to write goals for kids for speech and language, but some of them have autism or ADHD or both. And I'm glad to say I think the speech therapy world is moving into more functional goals that aren't really masking goals like I think they used to be, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad to say I feel like we're moving away from that, but oftentimes it is hard to, I think, in a field that is kind of archaic sometimes, be like ethical in the like writing goals that are technically like research based, which like whatever that means, and also super functional and non-masking, because oftentimes the parents will want them to have an eye contact goal, right? I try to talk them out of it. And what do you think about that side of things?
Yeah.
It really annoys me that I find a lot of these sorts of things should be taught in school. Like we teach some things in school where often it could be, like in so many times in the last decade or so, things have become the school's responsibility that were previously the parents' responsibility. So like sex ed, for example, is now taught right down from a young age. And like that was always the parents' responsibility, to be like the birds and the bees talk comes from mum and dad, not from school. And I think I would really like neurotypes to be taught in school, because it's only ever neurodivergent people that are taught how neurotypical people work. And neurotypical people are taught by default. They're not actively taught, but they're taught by default that they are correct and anything left of you is wrong. And so they get this, and they learn that by seeing the teacher yell at the kid wriggling. They see it by the teacher yelling at the kid for asking the wrong question or whatever. And they're never taught that there's a different way of thinking other than their own. And so they become very sort of narrow-minded in what is correct. Whereas neurodivergent kids are always taught you need to make eye contact. Where neurotypicals are never taught it's okay if people don't make eye contact. Neurodivergent kids are yelled at if you ask the wrong question, where neurotypicals are never taught maybe they're actually saying what they mean and there's no meaning behind it. Neurodivergent kids, I don't know how many times I've upset people because I answered their question, not realizing that that's not actually the question they were asking. I remember a friend going, "Do you like my shirt?" And I went, "No, not really." And they're like, I was probably 15 at the time, and they're like, "Well, you're old enough to know better than that. Like, you hurt my feelings." And I'm like, what? I was so confused. I'm like, you asked if I liked your shirt, and I don't like it. I don't understand why I'm in trouble right now. Like, why would you ask that question if you're setting me up for failure here? Like that in my mind is stupid, and it irks me. Like, I think neurotypes should be taught in schools, and that all neurotypes should be taught how other neurotypes work so that nobody is offended. Where I shouldn't have to tell you that I'm autistic for you to not get pissed off at me. Like, I see that so often that someone's like, oh, I'm real, like after someone's yelling at them for something, they're like, I'm really sorry, I'm autistic. And I'm like, and they're like, oh, well, in that case, that was okay. I'm like, I shouldn't have to tell you I'm autistic for you to not be a dickhead to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And in a way, neurotypical rules, like setting you up like that, where it's like you're expected to lie, is more barbaric than being, neurodivergent, which is like you ask me a question and I'm giving you the answer. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Actually makes
And
sense.
I mean, you're always taught as a kid, don't lie. Lying's bad. And so we went, okay, lying's bad. I won't do that.
Yeah.
And the neurotypicals never came to that conclusion. They're like, oh, not lying's really hard. And we're like, no, it's not. It's actually really easy. What? I don't get it.
Very interesting, actually.
But then they change that. They tell you don't lie, but they don't tell you the rest of it unless someone's hurt, unless someone's feelings could get hurt, unless someone's in danger, unless that lie is blah, blah, blah. Like there's so many addendums to that one rule. You need to tell us the rest of the rules.
Exactly.
So often I'm happy to follow your arbitrary social rule if everyone's happy. Like if it's not stupid, like the sock thing's stupid. No one's feelings get hurt if my socks don't match. No one's hurt if my socks don't match. But if you tell me some arbitrary social rule and it's no extra effort for me to follow it, I'm happy to follow it, but you got to tell me it exists.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the eye contact thing,
Yeah.
that's a lot of extra effort. I'm not necessarily going to do that. I'm pretty okay with it, I think. No one's made comments. I won't stare into your eyes the whole time I'm talking. I'll look at you, I'll look away, I'll go look at that other thing like no one said anything. I don't know if it's weird. As I said, there's less of a stigma. Maybe. I mean, in high school, teachers used to yell at me saying, look at me when I'm talking to you. And that's actually the least likely time I'm going to look at you because it feels aggressive. I don't think neurotypicals realize how aggressive looking in somebody's eyes while they're yelling at you. Like if you want me to start coming back at you, force me to look in your eyes because like I can sort of stay calm if I'm looking over here while you're telling me off. But if you force me to look in your eyes, that feels aggressive. Like, now I'm going to say something I shouldn't say because
you don't want me to look at your eyes.
Trust me, I'm not swinging.
Well, Jo, this has been absolutely awesome. We learned so much from you, and this hour went by so quickly.
Oh, I can't believe it. Thank you so much for your time. Really generous. And we just have one more question for you. Do you like us?
Yeah, you're not bad.
We'll take it.
Yeah. So far,
that's Aussie for good. I'm told no one else does that. My bad. Yeah, if we say not bad, it means good.
Okay. Cool.
I think there was an Aussie comedian that did a bit on that. There's like Aussies won't tell you how it is; they'll tell you how it's not. Like, how's the weather outside? Yeah, it's not too hot. How far is it? It's not too far. What time is it? Oh, it's not too long till we leave.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I never realized we did that till they pointed that out. I'm like, oh yeah, no, we do.
I like that though.
I do too.
That's
It's
nice.
cool. It's a change up.
We'll also pay you out if we like you. It's everything's backwards down here. If we're polite to you, we probably don't like you that much.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
yes,
I hope you're not polite to us then.
Yeah.
It's not even if we've only just met, we'll be nice to you. So if we're polite to you, either we don't know you well enough to pay you out yet, or if we've known you for a while and we're still not paying you out, we don't like you.
That's kind of true. I feel like with us at least, like with each other, we're not super polite. But I definitely am going to be polite to someone I don't know that well.
Yeah.
Or I don't.
Yeah, I treat her like shit. I'm kidding.
Well, Jo, thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been super awesome. And you shed a new light to the whole NeuroSparkly community that I didn't even understand before. So I personally learned a lot in this.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Very cool.
And I hope
cool. Thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, have a good day.
Ciao.
Bye.